curriculum, as well as how churches may get involved. Because of the two topics, you are recognized for 7 minutes.
Thank you. As many of you know, I'm a physician. I work here at Redlands Community Hospital and Beaver Medical Group. But I wanted to start this out with a statement. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created with an XY pair of chromosomes, and they are endowed by their Creator with certain indisputable physical traits, that among them are male genitalia, greater body and facial hair, and more than 6,500 genetic differences from a female. In summary, genetics determines gender. Not your personal choice, not your personal feelings. The whole concept of gender has been transformed by pressure from the LGBT activist groups. So they have redefined this now. Now, just to give you the definition from Positive Prevention Plus, gender is defined as attitudes, feelings, and characteristics and behaviors that a given culture associates with being male or female. Now, let me give you the medical definition of gender. This comes from Dorland's Medical Dictionary, 1976, before this big LGBT movement. It says, it is the anatomic sex of an individual as determined at birth. Gender and sex are synonymous. However, that whole definition has been changed. And it teaches the concept that there are multiple genders, that there's gender fluidity, that you can switch your gender at will, and it normalizes transgenderism, gender nonconformity, and binary gender. There is no scientific basis for this. There is no gay or transgender gene. It's an acquired condition, often associated with childhood sex abuse and lack of an effective gender role model or contradictory gender role reinforcement. So by teaching the concepts that are going to be in this program, this teaching of gender, it will undoubtedly contribute to the social contagion of transgenderism that's already spreading in our culture. Just to give you a piece of information, the reported incidence of transgenderism is 1 in 300 individuals in adults. Now, there's a recent study that was published at the UCLA Center for Health Policy that found that as many as 27% of LA area teens are now viewed as transgender or gender nonconformed. So bias-based groups. The other thing I wanted to bring up is this whole program will often bring in bias-based groups to come in and teach this gender training and comprehensive sex education, including Planned Parenthood, ACLU, LGBT groups, and this can provide very biased information that will basically help benefit their groups. The other thing that's very important to bring up is that teachers and administrators could initiate referrals for transgender transition therapy, with or without parental consent. And that could lead to kids having puberty blockade, cross-sex hormones, permanent infertility, and removal of healthy body parts. So this is really very concerning, especially when you consider that 80 to 95% of kids, teens with gender dysphoria, will outgrow that. So for this reason, the American College of Pediatrics has come out with a strong recommendation that children with gender dysphoria not undergo these therapies, and recommend that school officials and legislative policies not promote gender ideology. So next slide I wanted to show you. Let's see if we've got it. Just to give you an idea, gender dysphoria is a true mental disorder. It is deserving of compassion, love, and counseling. It's an emotional state of profound unease and dissatisfaction with your biologic gender. But what's significant about this is that 60% of these individuals will suffer from depression, 55% from anxiety disorder, 40% with dissociative disorders or split personalities, 70% will have alcohol and substance abuse issues, and 41%, sadly, will attempt suicide. So this is not mentally healthy, and it's not something that we should promote in the public schools. Male to female transgenders have a 22% incidence of HIV. That is higher than homosexual males, okay? And we want to produce, the other thing that's important to bring up is that they also contract most of the same sexual transmitted diseases that homosexuals do. The transgenders also have a 2 times higher unemployment and homelessness rate, a 4 times more likely to earn less than $10,000 a year. So the question is transgenderism something that we really want to promote in the public schools? Okay. The next slide I wanted to talk about is the religious objections to transgender. And there are many. Many of you, in fact, on your little brochures that I put on the table, you'll see some of these biblical references. But Jesus, in Matthew 19, confirmed what was taught in the book of Genesis, that there are only 2 biologic genders, male and female. So by teaching this gender ideology in public schools, we're basically telling our kids that Jesus Christ and God the Father are both liars. We're telling them that the Bible is false. Also, we're talking about in Deuteronomy 22:5 and 1 Corinthians 6:9-11, transgenderism is prohibited because it represents gender fraud. Yes, okay? And inevitably leads to homosexual activity that is considered a sin. So I wanted to go ahead, I'm going to skip this topic about spiritual abuse, but I do want to talk about a free speech issue, which is basically this program commands students to represent and appreciate the diverse sexual orientation and gender identities. And this is a basically compelled speech, and it's a First Amendment violation. So the other thing I want to talk about was... Yes, I'll finish.
I have a report that you're not hearing, so please hold
Okay.
closer to your
Okay.
mouth and speak a little louder.
All right, so the other thing I want to talk about is a comprehensive sex education. Much of this has already been discussed earlier, but it does equate anal and oral sex with vaginal sex and appropriately teaching the higher risk and does not appropriately teach the higher risk of sexually transmitted diseases, HIV, and cancer. There's no mention of the infertility complications of STDs, and there's also an emphasis that the teen can receive medical care and STD, birth control, abortion without parental consent or knowledge. Okay, and listed here, I just want to show you this other slide here. These are some of the dangers of anal sex. And this is not all presented to children. This needs to be discussed because if they're going to teach this kind of stuff, they need to warn the kids appropriately. And these risks include multiple sexual transmitted diseases. In fact, 2/3 of all HIV transmissions are through anal sex. 83% of the syphilis cases are due to anal sex. And it also have a 2.5 times higher risk of contracting gonorrhea. They can get fecal incontinence and also anal cancer. So finally, I just wanted to wrap up with the religious objections and just mention that it basically provides no value judgment regarding the various types of sexual contacts, and it is in direct conflict with biblical teachings. In fact, 1 Corinthians 6:19 says that we should flee sexual immorality, but this curriculum basically encourages that type of stuff. And so that's all. I'm going to finish up with that, and thank you for your time.